Yeah,
And I
so-
realized, Ethan, I failed to ask you, like, where you're from, how you got involved with the Sentinel, things like that.
Yeah, I was born in California, moved to the East Coast when I was really young, moved
Okay.
to Brookfield, Connecticut, actually.
Okay.
That's where I was raised and went to school.
And that's up near Danbury, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then, went to Fairfield University for school, and like journalism was pretty much the only thing I was ever any good at, so,
Okay.
or, writing, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So then graduated in '04 and then worked at the Journal-Inquirer of Manchester for
Okay.
a couple of years.
Okay.
Worked at a magazine in New York for a year, and then I was actually at the News-Times in Danbury.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we worked
Did
together.
you know? Oh, okay,
yeah,
so you knew each other.
And Eugene left to start here, and
Right.
I remember thinking at the time, like, is he going to be back in 6 months, begging my
point.
editor for
That's
a
a good
job?
point.
And I did have a pattern of leaving the News Times in Danbury and coming back.
Oh, you did.
So then, he went off. I went to law school for a year,
Oh,
and then
wow.
determined I would not make a good lawyer. So
Okay.
as I was sort of looking around for a job after that, I worked in newspapers, but obviously, like as Eugene said, it's a tough industry and whatnot.
Right.
So the opportunity here arose, and I had known Eugene, and I knew he was good,
Right.
and I just by reputation, I knew Jody was good. So I leapt at that opportunity and
Oh, wow.
started here last February.
Did you approach
2012.
him, or were you already advertising for another reporter?
I put feelers out and
Okay.
Craigslist ads, and I think I had
Okay.
advertised it pretty heavily.
Okay.
Ethan had done so, and we were sort of in contact with each other
Right.
from our days at the News Times.
Right.
We basically, argue with each other on Twitter over movies.
Oh, okay.
And so, I don't remember exactly how it worked. Ethan had done one freelance assignment for us, another freelance assignment I think you didn't show up for. It was kind of shady. But,
My car and stuff.
right, my car. But then we talked about it.
Election day.
Right, worked election day.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a big, it's
Oh,
a big,
yeah.
big
Oh, yeah.
production.
Oh, yeah.
And I offered it to Ethan thinking I'm really happy that he's here. 'Cause
Yeah.
I know what caliber of
No,
reporter he
that's
is.
good. That's good. That's
So-
a known quantity. That's always good.
Yeah, so it was good. It was good that I didn't think he'd say yes, to be honest with you, but he did. So
No, I
when he
wasn't that-
moved to the Valley, he had to move to Shelton. So
Why would you
requirement.
think he would say yes, or were you kidding?
No, I really thought, I didn't know what he wanted to do. I didn't,
Oh, okay.
I mean, the Valley Independent Sentinel, we're not Newsweek, we're
Yeah.
not outside the Valley. You might not have any idea who we are.
Well, that
so.
reminds me, what magazine did you work for in New York?
Oh, it was a trade magazine, Commercial Property News. It was
Okay.
about
Okay.
a lot of commercial real estate
Oh, okay.
nationwide, basically.
Okay.
So I know a lot about, net absorption of office space and things like that. Fascinating things, yeah. But,
Did you live in the city, or did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
in Manhattan, which is, it's everybody should live in New York City for a year
I
of their
agree.
lives.
I agree.
Costs, it's not
Right,
cheap,
right,
but
exactly.
it's a lot of fun.
Just experience it, sure.
I say just go to Yonkers instead. Same thing. It's cheaper. You get on a train.
Being able to live in a valley, small town region where you can really affect the community and things like that, and yet an hour train ride and you're in New York and do all that's there without,
Yeah.
like you say, without the expense of having to live there and all the other stuff that goes on.
And yeah, I didn't know much about the Valley before I moved here. My brother had lived here for a few years in like the early 2000s in Ansonia.
Right.
So I made the trip down 34 a few times from Brookfield.
Right.
But then I moved to Shelton. I live right near Shelton City Hall now,
Oh, okay.
which makes it incrably convenient
Oh,
to
yeah.
cover,
That's
night
right.
meetings and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
that's right. Good
You
point.
can always see when the mayor is in City Hall.
Yeah, exactly.
His bedroom window overlooks the parking spot,
That's
which
right.
is pretty good.
But yeah, like as you said about the Valley, it's a lot closer knit than say Brookfield, and there's a lot of like going back decades and decades, like a lot of immigrant communities,
Right.
Developed around like Italians or
Exactly.
Irish or
That's-
whatever.
that's right, the
I think
ethnic-
that plays a part
Totally,
too,
yeah.
across town lines.
And this is one of those unique areas where you have different ethnicities, all this diversity, and people pretty much get along.
Mhm.
I mean, you could have factions even in New York City where you have Little Italy, Chinatown, things
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But are they necessarily unified in
Mhm.
in what they do and things like that? So I think it's good. but you're right. That's great. I mean, you have Polish, Italian, Irish, whatever. It's really nice that way.
And even to this day, like there was a Polish festival, I think over in Warsaw Park,
Right.
a couple days ago.
Mhm.
And there was, there's Festa every year. And
Yep,
it's just
that's
they
right.
retain it, and
Exactly.
it's great to see.
Now, you mentioned how the Valley Independent Sentinel came to be. It's kind of evolved from the New Haven side of things. But the Sentinel, as many of our viewers know, was a print newspaper, the Evening Sentinel. Is there any tie-in from this to that? And if so, what are the differences, similarities, things like that?
I think we're named in honor of the Sentinel.
Okay.
There were definitely people within the Valley Community Foundation who remember the paper and knew what the name value is.
Right.
So they sort of bestowed us with sort of the street cred. We
Right,
call ourselves
sure.
the Sentinels. We had that blessing.
So you actually had to ask permission to use that name?
No.
Okay.
What happened was it was a name that was conceived by VCF. And
Oh, they already had that
Yeah.
name. Oh, interesting.
What I meant to say was that the VCF sort of said, name it this, call it the Sentinel.
Okay.
It's sort of our link back to
it'll
what
give
it
you
was.
some
Because
instant
if we came on the scene and we were like the Driscoll Gazette, people would move. What's that? The Sentinel gave us name recognition
Good
as to,
point.
as
You
to
mean you
what
don't
we
have
were.
name recognition?
I'm trying on Facebook every day. But and that's really it. I mean, we're definitely, some things that we did, on our site, on the website, we have obituaries on the
Right, which
front.
I just noticed, I never even knew that until
Yeah.
somebody who I knew was there, and I saw it. I actually got linked to the article,
Okay.
but I'm like, where is it? And I'm clicking on Shelton Derby and Sony. I couldn't find it, realizing, you have a whole separate, that's
It's
a
the
really,
first, yeah, it's
Yeah,
and that was
that's it.
done because we had heard that the Sentinel back in the day used to put obits on the
Right.
front page a lot.
Oh, that's right.
So that's sort of a callback
Sure.
to that.
Okay.
But in general, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say we produce the Evening Sentinel every day.
Right,
Because it's
right.
2013.
Agreed.
And it's not what's happening.
Right.
I think one thing that's changed in terms of, it's 2013, so there's social media. I think a lot of the things, sort of the fluff pieces, we'll call
Right,
them,
yeah.
and I don't mean that disparagingly.
I know
Some
what
of
you
the
mean.
community announcements, people we're not necessarily writing them. It doesn't say by Ethan Fry,
Right, right.
but we're printing that information. A lot of
Right.
things that you share on Facebook
Right, right.
are things that you don't necessarily have to come to a newspaper for in
That's right.
2013.
That's right.
I want to go strawberry picking, or I want to go blueberry picking.
Right, right.
You don't have to come to valleyindy.org.
Right.
Go to the Jones Family Farms Facebook page.
Right.
That's primary source.
But
They have it.
but you also become somewhat of a community bulletin board in that sense.
We have
where you're
we have
trying-
we have the numbers.
Right.
We can repost and if you're we can get people to see your
Correct.
items. But
Correct.
it's sort of what we do. I think what we do well, and it's important in this sort of the media economy of modern day journalism.
Right,
Breaking news,
right.
and we're watchdog for the people on their local government. I
Mhm.
think those are probably the two things that we do best. We're not necessarily looking to do a ton of feature stories, sort of those slice of life stories. We don't,
Yeah, I
we don't do
understand.
as
Right,
much,
right,
but
right.
we take the information in,
Right.
and we'll link you directly to a source of information. If Teresa Gallagher from Shelton Trails and Conservation,
right.
she's an expert
Absolutely.
on trails and conservation
Right.
in Shelton.
Right.
What we do is, if she sends us a news release, I'm not going to rewrite her,
Oh, absolutely.
her words
Oh,
or
absolutely.
call her up and do a half-baked story
Right,
over something I
right.
don't understand. We'll take her document, put it on our website,
Right.
give her the byline,
Right.
and then it goes out to the
Yeah, and
people.
actually you've done that as guest columns too, right?
We do, yes,
Which,
yeah.
Which appreciate very much. You put some of mine up there, and
Right.
also with the press releases for this show.
And it leaves us, we have time to do some of the other
Right,
reporting.
exactly.
That
isn't in that form.
right.
Where you have to be one-on-one and talking to people.
And if you're
Right.
in like legacy, like a print media, like Eugene said, you deal with a lot of like the gatekeeper function
Yes,
of like,
yes.
is this good enough to make it in tomorrow,
Oh, yeah.
And I remember like the newspapers I worked at, where there would be press releases about an event,
Right,
that the event's going on August 25th or whatever.
right.
And then it would be on the budget, the story budget, starting August 14th, doesn't have to run till
okay.
August 24th, and then you'd see it on the next day's budget, and the next day's budget, and the next day, and then, it must run August 23rd or whatever. Here,
needs some
we're not
resources.
constricted by like a print product. So,
Right, that's right.
Yeah, put it online right now.
Yeah, I mean, so the turnaround time is some of
Day
the
before
stuff.
the event, we'll refresh it to the top of the page so people are reminded of
That's
it.
true.
And it's,
Yeah, I've seen that.
it's so much easier.
And we'll put that product, I mean, if you send it a press release, like your show
Right, right.
you can go to our homepage at times, and when we
Yes.
posted it, it's right next to, whatever the news of the day
Yes,
is.
yes,
We don't
yes.
we don't kind of relegate you to
Yeah.
you don't have to go searching for your
Correct.
press release.
And you also
it
have
gets
that-
equal weight.
And you have that extra, which I think is a really nice, just a layout position, because you've got sort of your big lead stories, but then in a way, those things, it's like, oh, by the way, oh, by the way, oh, by the way. So you're constantly getting lead and oh, by the way is right next to each other, which is really nice. I think that's a really good.
That's like, yeah, that's something I've always found annoying about, corporate media websites is that it's just 5,000 things thrown at you all at once, and widgets and,
It's hard
whatever.
to-
Yeah, it's
And
tough.
ours is, it's probably a function of, we're not gonna spend $1 million on some redesign.
Well, the way it was
redesign,
Smart Pill Design
Yeah,
in New
it's
Haven,
just
it's a
very
web
simple,
company.
Oh, okay.
clean, yeah.
They do a lot of nonprofit stuff,
Okay.
and they designed the New Haven Independent. And before we launched, Paul Bassett said to me, "Do you want to, what do you want the site to look like?" I
Right.
said, "Just take New Haven, let's do
Yeah,
that because
yeah,
it looks good."
Right.
And the other thing, like in terms of putting press releases and putting the public's info out there, is that what we find is we know exactly what people want to read.
Right.
Because on the web, they click it.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's no longer, when I worked at print products, we would have an A1 story meeting. What are we going to put on the front page tomorrow?
Right.
It would happen about 4 or 4:30 every day, and there'd be this debate among people in a closed room. I mean, you couldn't smoke, but you'd almost want to see cigarettes in there, and everybody would try to use their. The thing is, we know.
Right,
We know.
right.
And the Valley likes hard news.
Yeah.
Because it was going to get into one thing that you asked us about was sort of previous to this.
Yeah, I understand.
About negative stories and
Sure.
positive stories
Yeah,
and
right.
how we decide what.
Absolutely.
And by and large, people, at least in the Valley, they want their hard news. They
Right.
want to know what their government's up to.
Right.
They want to know why that police car was outside their house.
Right.
And those are the sort of the things that we can try to get as reporters. And then sort of the feature stories and community announcements, we can kind of take, edit, and put it on quickly.
Right.
So we have time to do some of those other hard stories.
Mm-hmm. I think the best thing is the idea that it's a mix. I mean, even within your own online source, you have a mix of things. Like you said, you have some community, some hard news, things like that. I mean, in a way, this show, doesn't really get into the hard news aspect because it's a weekly
Yeah.
taped
It's just
show.
time.
So I think, but that's just,
And we get tagged, I'll be perfectly
Go
honest,
ahead.
we get tagged with the "you're too negative." We get hit with that
Right.
often. And it enrages me, of course, because I'll go back and I'll count up. I mean, it's such
Yeah.
I don't know, we can't sit there and decide, like let's say I'm doing a story on a bake sale. And I'm
Right,
typing it
right.
up and I'm listening to my tape recorder where I
Yeah,
tape the person
yeah,
who hosted
yeah.
it, and suddenly there's a building on fire across the street here
Right.
in Ansonia. Well, I mean, obviously I have to drop the bake sale story, and like news happens as it happens.
Right,
And you
right.
can't sort of say, well, you know what, I'm not going to cover that giant fire on Main Street because we've hit our quota of so-called negative stories.
Right.
It's actually a violation of our code of ethics to do something like that. So we don't really have we don't weigh, okay, we've done this many
Yeah.
positive stories, and also positive and negative
It's
mean
relative.
completely
Oh,
different
yeah,
things.
absolutely.
And we've had people say,
Absolutely.
we've done stories on drug busts, and I'll even, like here in Ansonia, they've done, hard work, the undercover officers, and
Right.
they've made undercover buys, and they've
Right.
taken down some fairly large alleged criminal enterprises.
Right.
And when we publish that, we just publish the facts. I really don't think whether it's negative or positive.
Right.
I think if you live next door to where the alleged drug dealer was, it's probably a positive story.
That's right.
But then we've had people say, hey, you could have presented that drug bust in a positive light. And that's where it becomes,
I
we have a code of
understand.
ethics, and it would be, state-run media does that very well. If you want all positive news from like a news source, China does it pretty well. And that's not what we were, and I'm being facetious, whatever that word is. But that's where, people sometimes we get hit with that,
Yeah.
and I'll look, and you can count our stories,
Right.
and there's actually more positive than negative. That being said, if you look at what people click,
Oh, yeah.
people like to say, I just read
Right.
positive story,
Right. Oh, no, there's
The thing about
guilty
news-
pleasures and things like that.
well, it's
No, I
also,
understand.
it's human nature, we can't write a story about all the people that weren't shot today in a given city. There's just
sorry.
not room. But that's sort of what we're sort of hit with sometimes. And you can't have a lead that says, somebody posted this on my Facebook when I complained about this, that you can't write a story saying, hey, 3,500 people in Danbury, were okay today.
Right.
Except for Joe, whatever,
Right.
who got shot. That would be
Right,
so
right. I
insensitive to
understand.
do that.
Right.
So those are the things we debate with. And all that being said, we don't want to cover negative stories all the time.
Right.
The thing that's different about this publication is that if we do that, it starts to wear on us.
Yeah,
Or at least
yeah,
I
Oh,
get,
yeah.
Ethan's sort
I
of
would
heartless.
think so.
But for me, I get sick of it. And I've had times where I'm cutting my lawn in Derby, and somebody will pull up
Oh, yeah.
and get out of the car,
Wow.
and nobody's
Right.
swung at me yet.
Right.
But we keep that in mind. We don't want to be
Yeah.
the bearer of bad news all the
Sure,
time.
sure.
At the same time, you can't bury your head in the sand.
Right,
And you
I
got to do.
understand.
Journalism is
Yeah,
what
above
it is.
everything is just about accuracy and fairness, and then I think people realize that if you're accurate and fair, you get credit for that. And I gotta say, like, infinitely more so than any other newspaper or whatever I've worked at. Here, most of the time, I work for the Valley Independent Sentinel. Oh, I love what you do.
Wow.
We read you guys all the time.
I mean, in fairness,
That happens so much more here than any other place.
It is
I've
weird,
worked.
to get
And
positive
it's-
feedback.
and
I think at our root, I mean, I live in Derby. I
Right.
purchased a home in
Yeah,
Derby.
good point.
I'm going to be here unless they foreclose on it. I'm going to be here for a while.
Good
So, underlying everything we do, I mean, we do have a commitment to journalism and to,
Right.
to ethics.
Sure.
I want Derby to succeed.
Absolutely.
I mean, because
Absolutely.
I have a vested interest.
Yeah,
I want the
sure.
schools to be great. I want every
Absolutely.
kid graduating from that high school to go to Harvard.
Yeah.
Also, I don't want to pay anything in taxes. So
That's right.
from that perspective, I mean, we don't,
I understand.
we're rooting for the
I
valley
understand.
because we live here too.
Yeah,
So
no, you're right.
I just want to throw that as I vented for 20 minutes.
No,
I'm
that's
sorry,
okay.
Mark.
Hey, it's a forum. But a couple of things. One thing I was thinking of, speaking of like things for the Valley and what you've done now recently, I was aware that you had done a presentation at the Valley Council and for Health and Human Services, and they're one of our more recent guests. And I wondered if you could talk. First of all, was that the first time you ever did something like that, where you kind of presented the philosophy behind that, and then how did it go? What did you think?
We've spoken to groups like that, whether it's a group like that or Rotary,
Okay.
a couple of times. When we first launched, we went on kind of the speakers
Right.
tour.
Yes.
And a lot of times it was about, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're different. And it was an introduction. Here we are. Now we've been around for 4 years.
Right.
We launched June 2009.
Okay.
What we did in that particular group was I just gave them tips as a reporter
Right.
who's been on the community level
Right.
for 15 years now. How do you increase your chances to get something covered by a local newspaper?
Oh.
And then I talked about things like we just talked about, the perception of negative
Right,
versus,
right.
What a reporter thinks and what happens to your press release when it gets in. And I give them little insider tips, like when we were reporters in Danbury, basically if you had an event on Saturday,
Right.
they'd cover anything. Because by the end of the week, by Friday, you're trying to make a paper for Saturday,
Yeah.
Sunday, and Monday.
Oh,
So
interesting.
you got to do that all by
Yeah.
Friday afternoon. The editors want to go home. The reporters want to go to happy hour by Friday 5 p.m. So,
There'd be a Saturday reporter, but it was like they find one thing to do and like
Right,
lock them in.
the Saturday reporter was like, it was basically left up to that person.
Yeah,
I mean, if
yeah.
you really want inside
And if
information,
something caught on fire, they'd have to drop that and
Right,
go.
right.
find out who works Saturday at your local daily newspaper
Interesting,
and pitch stories to that
Put on
person.
there.
So this, like for example, with the Valley Council, your presentation was less about, let's say, how your website works and more about the philosophy behind it.
It was more like insider tips. I figured
Ah,
people,
okay.
I mean, hopefully they knew who we were.
No, right.
And we get sick of talking about ourselves. So it was just little things like that.
That's good.
None of the other suggestions are coming to mind at the
That's
moment.
okay. That's
And then I think I talked to the Derby Shelton Rotary.
Right.
I don't even remember what I talked about with them, but it was more, it wasn't about the Valley Indy
Right,
specifically.
right.
I think there was another couple reporters there at the time, right?
Well,
Oh, okay.
we've also done
Mixing them
leadership.
up, Yeah.
We've done Leadership Valley,
Oh,
where they'll have like
okay.
a media panel, where they'll have somebody
Oh,
from,
yeah, that's right.
We've
That's
done
right,
that
that's right.
too, and that's another one coming up.
Yes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think I'm going to be on that.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think it's
That's
great,
cool.
there's so many different now sources
Yeah.
on there. It's not just, the
Right.
one daily reporter and,
Right.
and us.
Gazette and Times
Now
and
it's
that's
everybody, yeah,
that's really good.
which is exciting.
Yeah, especially if you're encouraging, kids to get into journalism and things.
Oh, no, we're not. I mean, hey, if you can, I guess the key to being a journalist nowadays is to marry rich. If you can marry rich, by all means get into
Isn't that
this
the key to
profession.
everything, though?
I guess, I'm learning, I wish.
So as long as you mentioned the Leadership Valley, first of all, have you thought about offering like internships here, taking on volunteers or things like that, since you are limited budget-wise to have, other people help out?
We've had interns. We've had a steady succession of
okay.
interns. Yeah, and they we throw you right in. We've
Right,
had
sure.
interns cover breaking news.
Now, when you have an internship program, is it formal? Is it something where?
Yes.
So how does that work? I don't even know, how does that, to set up a formal internship program?
For the intern to come here, the first thing the intern has to do is go to their school and find out the requirements that each school requires.
Okay.
Because we only do it for credit. We don't
Okay.
pay, but we insist that you get credit
Right.
out of it.
Good.
And I think like to be an intern here, since we're so tiny, it's probably a better internship to have when you're a junior. When you have a couple of years under your belt. If you're a freshman walking in here and you don't know some
Yeah, I
AP
agree.
style, we're not really, things happen too quickly and we're too small.
Well,
But,
plus, if you're a freshman, you're trying to get used to just being at college.
Right,
You know,
yeah,
so,
I mean, you're probably better off, in so like the newspapers, the dailies have much more formal, structured intern, at least
Right,
they used to
right.
when I was in there.
Right.
We're a little loose. We kind of put you in, and I edit your stuff, and I give you tips, but you could walk in the first day, and you're covering whatever's going on.
Right.
So you have to be able to at least willing to do that. And
Okay.
usually it works if you have at least 2 years writing for your college paper and taking some classes, intro
Okay.
classes.
Okay.
So, but we're always, I mean, anybody can email me at eugenedriscoll@gmail.com.
Right.
And if you're in a college locally and you want to try it out. The most important, I think, for a reporter nowadays, well, not the most important, but one of the things that makes us a little different is that we're human.
Right.
You'll read the Valley Facebook account and you'll get a sense of at least who I am. I do
Just-
feel like some of our Facebook friends, like people
Right.
I've never even met, I feel
Right.
like they're my friends.
Exactly.
I mean, I can
Exactly.
even, Chris Bowen.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I
he
like
posts
him.
a lot,
He's
yeah.
on,
Yeah,
Teresa
he posts-
Gallagher, Tom
Right.
Harbinson.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've met Tom Harbinson in person and Chris.
Yeah, yeah.
But, there's a bunch of people out there that they just, they interact with us,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate it.
No, it is
And
good.
that's-
It's good. It's good from, like you said, from a number of hits. There's obviously the practical reason you want to feel like you're making a difference or getting through to people. But then, yeah, when you can do that, I mean, you just feel like, oh yeah, what do you think, Chris? Those kinds of things. It becomes a little more. It's like when you meet a celebrity one time versus if you get to know somebody and you feel like, oh wow, this person's human, and also, something like that. So.
And I think it also helps us in that, like, we don't work Saturday or Sunday.
Right.
And there's only, with 2 people, there's only so much you can do in one day.
Right.
And I think, and this wasn't planned by us, but I think the fact that we're so, some people would call it, unprofessional on Facebook. The readers know, okay, it's 4 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
something's burning
Yeah.
down. Obviously, Ethan's sleeping,
Right.
Eugene's changing diapers with his kids, and they're understanding. If we
Yeah.
miss a story,
Right.
they don't taunt us.
Right.
They understand we're human.
Yeah.
And that's
Or they'll
because
just go out and take a picture.
They'll-
and
yeah,
report.
that's
they'll
true.
let us
I've
know.
seen that.
It's
I've seen
amazing.
like they
yeah.
don't assume, they're all right here, and they'll just let us know.
Well, that
which
goes
is-
back
which
to-
is just
And that goes
So
back to the
great.
whole Valley banding together thing.
Mm.
I mean, it's just like people, okay, you guys are from here, you're working here, oh, you need some help, we'll be there.
Yeah,
for
they
you. I
really
think
do
that's-
that, yeah.
Definitely.
And I think
that's-
that like the couple of occasions since I've been here where we've sort of made an effort to sort of, be there to like 24 hours a day.
Right,
like
right,
Hurricane Sandy or
Right.
the big blizzard.
Right.
It's like we know that, if you're snowed in or if you don't have power and there's a tree across your driveway, you're not gonna
Yeah, you guys are very, power
have the
outages.
access to information that you usually do. So like we try to like, just sort of work throughout that whole day and night saying, this is happening here, this is
Yeah.
happening here. There's if you need to charge your cell phone, go to Seymour Middle
That's
School,
right.
or if you need, just.
And that was all
just
the
to put
readers.
That's
information
right, you
out
guys,
there.
the library was a cool center at one point, you did that when it was really hot.
And
in
like,
the summer.
the readers drove
in
the
terms
bus
of
with that.
instantaneous feedback, I mean, that was gangbusters.
Yeah, because you say, well, I have power, I'm
Yeah,
off,
yeah,
I have
yeah,
power,
yeah.
people chime in, and then suddenly you get an idea of, and I mean, if I'm UI or Connecticut Lab Hope, they're reading it too, they're like, oh, this place needs more help than others. I mean, I would think it would be the same idea, so that's really good. But one of the things we were talking about with the community calendar, like you guys, first of all, have started to do things like coming up with things to do this weekend. I guess, where did that come from, and how successful has it been so far?
That's been, we do it when we can.
Right, right.
We try to encourage people to use our self-serve calendar as much as possible.
Right,
It used to be on the Valley, Electronic Valley,
right,
and
right.
once we launched, Jack Walsh, who has a big part in Electronic
Sure,
Valley,
sure.
sort of said, hey, he directed people to us.
Right.
And the things to do, we're just trying to get people to use our calendar more and more.
Oh, I see.
We do it when
Okay.
we can.
Right, right.
Sometimes in the last couple of weeks, we really haven't done it because it's just been so busy.
Right.
We haven't been able to do it, but that's where that comes from.
Or if we see that there's a lot
If
of
there's a
stuff
million,
going
yeah,
on.
there's a couple of
Right,
weekends
right.
in the valley
Yeah,
where,
I was gonna
especially
say.
early summer, where there's
Yeah.
there's only 20 or 30
Or
things going
October,
on.
I know, like
There's
always
a lot, yeah.
Ansonia Harvest Festival in Shelton.
Right, so
They
we'll
tend to
do
be the
it
same
when we know there's a
weekend.
giant thing coming.
Yeah,
we'll,
yeah.
we'll do it.
There's so many, huge
Yeah, so-
events, it seems like every
Yeah.
year.
So that's that. And when we've had interns, that's one of the things where
Oh,
we
yeah,
said,
that's a
like,
good idea.
research what's going on, look at our calendar, and put together the things to do.
And the other thing periodically I'll see is these were our most popular stories this week. You count down 5 to 1. First of all, like, what is that based on? Is that based on number of hits, number of comments,
page views.
Oh, it's strictly page views, so it's just...
Yeah, whatever gets read the most.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we do it, and we just do it on Facebook. It actually doesn't
Right.
really appear on our site.
that's true.
technically.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
technically it goes from Facebook to Twitter, and our Twitter feed is published on our site.
Oh.
But yeah, I just like to do that. You know, we have a little content, and the real reason I do that is to let people know we're not publishing this weekend. To be perfectly honest with you, just to sort of put out there.
Right.
See you Monday.
You know, yeah, see you Monday is probably the most important thing to me. Because on Saturdays my wife works and I'm taking care of the two babies, and you know,
and
Ethan's doing his
you've actually
thing.
put that. You say, oh, by the way, we're off till Monday.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. You know, it's always interesting to see what people read.
Oh yeah.
You know,
sure.
and
Sure.
so because sometimes we'll take bets. Well, we don't literally take bets, but sometimes we're surprised. We're like, oh wow, that's the most
Yeah,
fun
right,
story.
Yeah.
And it's the what we read, I guess, the left column where you've got, either other sites or, obviously the schools are listed, things like that. I mean, is that something, was that already on the New Haven version, or is that something you guys?
Some of it, well, it's just, I mean, it's simply a blog roll. The concept of which has been around since blogs were invented.
Right.
Some of those are actually things we literally read.
Right.
Some of them I took from New Haven
Mhm,
Independent. There's like the Minnesota Post or minpost.com,
Okay.
which is sort of this big, well-respected nonprofit.
Okay.
I put that on it to make myself look smarter.
Right.
But usually, there's a lot of things like people will write us in and say, hey, I have this new blog, and we'll check it out, make sure it's not really, make sure it's legal, I guess.
Right.
And then we'll link to it. So if somebody sends me an email and say, hey, I got a blog, I'll link
Right.
to it.
Oh.
What happens more than not, I mean, when we have interns, we have them check each
Sure.
each link. With blogs and the nature of
Oh, yeah.
people who aren't writing full time, they tend not to be updated, but it's
Right.
still there. There's a couple of,
Yeah.
there's a couple that I read, and now we've started to. It's like almost like Facebook sort of replaced blogs.
Right.
Like
Right.
I read Clearly Derby every day on Facebook. They also have a blog spot, but I
Right,
get it
right.
from Facebook, and I think we have. I don't know which we've linked to on our We Read, but long story short, those We
I
Read
understand.
things we read.
You can be a very good organization unto yourself, but when you really are visibly reaching out to the community, especially in a community like this, which appreciates that, I've seen those are the ones that seem to take off.
And you're the man with that. I mean, we've sort of watched you
As far as
going
what?
from as just self marketing, and going out there and having passion.
Thank you.
So we should copy you with some of that.
I try-
You should take us along.
I would love to.
take a banner.
Well, I'll happy to do that if we can definitely have the show embedded every week.
I know exactly.
Now, you also mentioned, you've obviously reiterated about the fact that you guys are a nonprofit, and I was thinking about the fact that you presented at the Valley Council. The Valley Council, I mean, I guess it's Health and Human Services, so you're more the human side than health side. But have you considered being part of the council? Because that's 40 nonprofits right
The
there.
day I went there,
Right.
I was so impressed by just
Oh,
because at
yeah.
the beginning they just went around and they said,
Yes.
"Here's what we're doing."
Exactly.
And you go to it, and you're just like, "Well, this is amazing."
I
Just,
know.
Like everything was a book, let alone a story.
Exactly.
I should I've half considered it. I mean, just
Time.
with the two kids, it's
Yeah.
like
No, I
a little
understand.
crazy. But I was after that meeting, I was like, "Well, we should really
I
be
know.
here."
Gentlemen, I guess I can't say enough. I really appreciate you having us here.
No, thank you so much.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
not a
Thank
problem.
you, thank
No,
you, thank you.
Appreciate it, and I'm sure this is the kind of thing we could definitely have an ongoing kind of situation.
Once a week, you can come here once a week.
That'd be great. That'd be great, As far
If you ever
as-
need interview space, we'll move our desks
I
in.
know, this is
Seriously,
great. This
come on
looks
in.
like I could just leave a camera here.
We're lonely up
right?
here.
That's right. But before we go, just as people are, first of all, that we obviously it's an online presence, so the website. If people haven't read or want to continue to read the Sentinel, where can they find?
Yeah, www.valleyindy.org, valleyindy.org. And then if you have news tips or recipes to share, any reason you want to call
Oh
us.
wow!
Never
That's
thought of that, but
great.
let's
That's
go.
a great idea.
203-446-2335, and on Twitter at valleyindy, VALLEYINDY.
Okay, and Facebook, as we mentioned.
Facebook.com,
Yeah.
Valley Independent Sentinel.
Does the Valley Indy have its own YouTube channel? Do you guys have
Yes,
Okay, you do.
yes,
You have
we
that, so
do.
you can
And the
just
name
search
of
that.
it escapes me.
It's
No, that's okay.
youtube.com/valleyindysentinel.
Well, I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank
Eugene,
you.
This
Thank
has been
you.
great.
Thank you so much.
Ethan,
Thanks a
and
lot.
thank you for watching. Have any comments on the show? Feel free to provide feedback, questions, or suggestions to lookingupvalley@gmail.com or check out our Facebook page and dedicated website. Thank you very much.